I'm Sue Becker. This is my husband, Brad Becker, and we have a company called Bread Beckers in Woodstock, Georgia. But today, I'm just so honored to be asked to fill in for Dr. Cedric. I just think that's amazing. I'm like, sure, I'll do this. So I hope today that I bring a message of hope and encouragement. I'm going to follow my notes a little bit because I can get very long-winded. I have a 3.5-hour video that I encourage you to watch, so I have to hone me in like, okay, what can I say in 20 minutes? Well, I'm going to talk really fast. But anyway, what I'm thinking is you're here, you're taking a healthy living as God intended. You know, we all have friends and loved ones that are facing health issues, and probably we even ourselves are facing these issues. Perhaps you younger ones have children that are snotty noses, just seem to get everything that comes around and goes around, chronically sick, ear infections and all of that. And maybe you aren't facing a serious illness. Maybe you have chronic complaints like constipation. You didn't know I was going to say that in the sanctuary. But anyway, constipation, irritable bowel. I'm not going to do my poopy talk today. That's my favorite talk, so we're not going to do that. But, you know, acid reflux, chronic sinus congestion, these things just seem to be the norm these days. And oftentimes we're told that's just the way of things these days. I hear moms come to me and say, took their child to the doctor, chronically constipated, can't go every 5 days, they'll go without going. And the doctor says, it's just the way of things these days. There's nothing really you can do about it. I'm here today to tell you there's something you can do about it. And so I understand. I was there. I've been there, struggled with many of these things that I just shared with you because they're common. They're common diseases that plague most Americans. And but in 1991, I was introduced to a healthy eating concept that radically changed my life. Not only my health and the health of my family, but changed my husband and I, our whole trajectory of God's calling on our life. Brad and I have been married. This year will be 50 years. We will celebrate in September. We've raised 9 children, and we are headed, as soon as I finish here, to a baby shower for my baby girl who's pregnant with our 19th grandchild. So we're very excited about that. And then this past year, we learned that we will be great-grandparents for the first time. So we have a great-grandbaby due in, I believe, June, my oldest grandchild. July. Anyway, in 1991, I was introduced to this healthy eating concept, like I said, that radically changed my life. Through a medical publication that I subscribed to, I learned this. Grains are the most nutrient-dense food God has given us. Don't let anybody tell you differently. Don't get on that bandwagon, I'm telling you. We'll talk about Genesis 1:29 in just a minute, but they are the most nutrient-dense food that God's given us, but only when they're stored whole and intact do they retain all of their life-giving nutrients. You can eat them whole, boiled and eaten like rice, or we think of rice like that, but you can eat wheat and barley and all of those things like that. But once you mill them, they begin to lose their nutritional value. And here's what I learned in that journal. The common diseases that plague most Americans can be directly related and connected to the commercially processed flour products that are in the store, whether it's the bread or the cakes, the cookies, the crackers, and all these things. And I learned this, that enrichment is not a favor that food companies are doing for us. Quite the contrary. For the multitude of vitamins and minerals that are lost by taking away the bran and germ, they only put 5 back in. 5 for the 35 to 40 that are lost. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. I have a degree in food science from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Woohoo, good. I got dog fans in here. Sorry if y'all aren't. Too bad. Y'all are missing out. But anyway, after graduation, so food science is the study of food processing. After graduation, though, I actually went to the University of Georgia as a pre-med student. I loved physiology. I loved biochemistry. I wanted to save the world. You know, you think that's what doctors do, if only. But anyway, but I realized once I got there, I didn't want to be in school that long, and I knew I ultimately wanted to be a wife and a mother. I'm not saying you can't be a doctor and be a wife and a mother. I know plenty of good ones, but I knew that wasn't the role that I wanted to take. But after graduation, I just continued to study physiology, biochemistry, read all the books I could get my hands on, my textbooks, and my basic philosophy was if something's not working in my body, because I know, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, because the Bible tells us that. And God gave us food to nourish our bodies. So it was kind of like, if something's not working, then I must be missing a nutrient. And I don't want to totally simplify, but kind of think about your car. If your car sputters and kind of stops running and you coast off the side of the road, what's the first thing you look at? Your gas gauge, right? You don't go, oh, I might need heart surgery, or I might be having a stroke here. No, you look at your gas gauge, right? So that's kind of my jumping off place. And when I read this journal, and in that journal, the history of white flour was presented, and then a short discussion on the common diseases that plague America, how it was directly related to that flour, the commercially processed flour, I was like, how come I didn't know this? I'm a food scientist. How come I didn't put these pieces of the puzzles together before? Especially, I continued to study on my own. How come I didn't know this? I did read, that whole wheat flour was better, but I was trying to buy the whole wheat flour in the store and feed my family. And I was feeding my family real food. I grew up Southern, so I cooked, and I never used boxes, and we didn't have junky things, maybe a little, in the house. But so I was like, why didn't I know this? When I was trying to feed my family, how come I didn't know this? I was trying to buy the whole wheat flour from the store because I knew it was healthier, and make whole wheat bread for my kids and my family. If you've never tried the whole wheat flour in the store, it's nasty. Don't even go there. Outside of milling your own, you can't get there. So anyway, I purchased an in-home grain mill, and I began to mill all the flour to make all the bread, muffins, pancakes, anything made out of flour I made it with my freshly ground grain. At that time, I had 5 young children. We homeschooled our kids, so we were eating a lot of food. But the health benefits from this one change, mind you, we were already eating healthy. We were eating real fruit, real vegetables, real meat, real potatoes, real butter, real milk, raw milk, and made this one change. Wow. It was amazing. The mill came into my home, and I feel like I need to tell you how many. I know a lot of you already mill. Raise your hand if you already do. Some of you others are like, what is she talking about? And I almost packed my mill up and brought it, because it was so funny. When we first started, I would take bread places. I would take muffins and coffee cake to every church event, and people would come to me and go, oh my goodness, I want your recipe. And I would go, okay, I can give you my recipe, but you have to understand I mill my own flour and make all of my own bread. And they would look at me. 2 questions they would ask. First one was, you do what? How many of y'all been asked that? You do what? I mill my own flour and make my own bread. And the second question baffled me for years. They would look at me and they go, where do you live? I think they were picturing a barn with the ox, or a grist mill. Maybe I lived by a stream. Maybe I was the ox. I don't know what they thought, but that was always puzzled me. I just thought, no, it's like this big, and it sits on my counter, and I have a very tiny kitchen, so it's not massive anyway. But the health benefits from this one change brought drastic results in our home. For me, the first day alone, meal came in our home, and I got it for my birthday many years ago, in 1991, so that would be almost 34 years ago, because my birthday's coming up in February, don't forget. But anyway, he can't, I won't let him. But anyway, my 70th birthday, I will be 70 in just a few weeks. But the meal came in our home. I milled flour, I made bread, and I pooped the next morning. I was like, yes, I did say that from the pulpit. Whew. All right. This was a big change for me. I'd been constipated all my life, didn't care when you're young, didn't care, But somewhere around 30, I was like, this isn't right. You're grumpy, and you're mean, and you're ornery, and all these other things. But anyway, mill the bread, mill the flour, made the bread, pooped the next morning, and I can stand here and tell you today I've not been constipated since 1991. You're like, okay, we came to Sunday school to hear that? Yeah, go ahead, clap. That's glorious. I learned that America is the most constipated nation in the world. Don't know how they found that out. I did not take that survey. I would have loved to, but anyway. So that was the first day, and you know what? The bread was delicious. It was delicious. It was not at all like the flour that I was buying from the store. And, you probably kind of already noticed I'm a pretty passionate person. I said one place I went to speak, I said, I love this. I said, I love real bread, and I love Jesus. So that's what I'm passionate about. But anyway, the bread was delicious. It wasn't like the store-bought flour that I was buying from the store. So constipation gone the first day. My energy levels, I noticed right away, boosted because of all the B vitamins and other things that we won't be able to get into today. But that was the first day. By the end of the month, my dependence on antihistamines completely gone. I lived on antihistamines to at least be able to sleep at night. I thought postnasal drip was just the way God made me. I thought snotty-nosed children, toddlers, was just the way of things. It doesn't have to be that way. My 2 youngest children that were conceived and born after bread have never been on an antihistamine or a decongestant, not one single day in their life. And my baby girl is about to be 29, and my other daughter, I don't remember how old she is, 33. There you go. Had to do some quick math. My sugar cravings greatly diminished. Like I said, we weren't junky eaters, but there were certain times, and you ladies are going to know what I'm talking about, you had to have chocolate. I mean, it was happening. And the first month that meal was in our house, that didn't happen. Then I noticed chronic headaches gone. I regularly had headaches. They were just kind of back there probably because of a lot of the sinus congestion. And I can stand here today to tell you, and I don't remember the last time I had a headache. Last year, I hurt my shoulder in January, and it was pretty bad. It was pretty intense. And to teach a class or to function and move it a lot, I had to take some ibuprofen or something. I had to go find a bottle in my house somewhere. I knew we had our token bottle just in case. This was last year, so that's 2024. It had expired in 2017. So that tells you how often I've needed painkillers and stuff like that. Then just in the first month, I started noticing our children didn't have snotty noses, ear infections, sniffles. They didn't catch every bug that came around. And I can also share this with you. In the 25 years of raising our children, 9 of them on real bread, 2 doctor visits for an illness. Did y'all hear what I just said? Some people go to the doctor more than that in a week with their children. So this was amazing. Did I tell you the bread's delicious? Did you taste the bread? Did everybody taste the bread? Is that not delicious? That was wheat this morning, 6 o'clock. I made that for y'all, all right? So this was whole healthy food my whole family would love. Who doesn't love bread? We're supposed to love bread. Jesus compared himself to bread. Oh, anyway, I won't go there today, but can you tell I'm excited? And the next thing I knew, I was making bread for others, and one by one, they began to ask me, where can I get this meal? Because they began to notice health benefits. And so I'll never forget one day baking bread all day long for all my neighbors and all these people that had heard about us and about this bread. And now I had 6 children homeschooling, making all of our bread. I met Brad in the driveway one day as he came home from work, and I said, I do not think I am supposed to make bread for the world. I think I'm supposed to teach the world to make bread for themselves. I had no idea what I was saying. But Bread Becker's was born in 1992, that day on my driveway in our 1,300 square foot home. And we stayed there until we outgrew our home, and we incorporated in 98 with a longtime friend and partner and moved our business to a warehouse in Woodstock, Georgia, where we're now one of the largest packaging facilities of grain. We distribute it all over the Southeast, actually all over the country now. We sell grain mills, the little tiny grain mills, and mixers and grains and beans and just everything you can imagine. So we have lots of classes. I teach cooking classes. But over the past 33 years, we've seen thousands now of lives change. And you know what they come to me and say? It's the bread. It's got to be the bread. That's the only thing I've changed. And so as I researched, when people would share with me their testimonies, I had mine, but I would search through my physiology and biochemistry books to find out what is in this bread that could lower someone's cholesterol 85 to 100 points in 1 month. And all they changed was the bread. And that's their story. And the first testimony that came to me, you know what she loved? I baked bread for her because she was an older lady, and I continued to bake for her for a long time. She loved my cinnamon rolls, you ready for this? With cream cheese icing. And she told me that morning that she called, she ate one after every meal. Statin drug, cinnamon roll with cream cheese icing. Side effects, cinnamon roll with cream cheese icing. 85, hers was 85 points. And she said, that's all I've changed. 3 years I've been trying to get my cholesterol down. 3 different doctors, multiple medications, and nothing changed until I changed the bread. So guess what? Then I started, people call me. My blood sugar is stabilized. I don't have IBS, debilitating IBS anymore. I'm not constipated. Don't have snotty noses. I began to pull out my biochemistry and physiology books and go, What is in this bread that could do this? What is in whole grains that could do this? Guess what? It's all there. Inositol, choline, B6, lecithin, vitamin E, fiber to keep our bowels moving the way God intended it. It's all there in freshly milled flour. So I'm going to show you today, I'm going to do just a little short presentation, why are grains and beans, and when I say bread, it can be a pot of black-eyed peas and brown rice. Y'all like black-eyed peas? So yeah, it could be those too. So it could be oatmeal, it could be a boiled grain salad, it can be bread, it can be muffins, it can be pancake. Doesn't necessarily have to be a slice of bread. Grains and beans, why are they so nutritious? In Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, God gave us two types of food. He said, I've given you plants that bear fruit with the seed in it. And I've given you plants that bear seed for your food. So plants that bear fruit, that have seed in it, what is that? That's our fruits and vegetables, right? But then plants that bear seeds, the seeds are your food. Why would God do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons, perhaps. I don't presume to be God, but here's what I do know. What happens to fruits and vegetables over time? They rot, they decay, they spoil, they continue to ripen, even hanging on the tree. They're losing nutritional value. They're losing nutrients. How else are they decaying, right? So we have those that we eat in season. I hope you've probably been talking about that. Shopping the perimeter of the grocery store. Let most of your grocery items come from the produce section. And we're so great now that we have all this available to us. But they rot and decay, not so with seeds. God knew we need two types of food. We've got to have some that are in season and some that we can store that do not lose their nutritional value. Store for next year. They're seeds. God made them that way because we got to have next year's crop, right? So we store our seeds so we can plant more food. They regenerate and regenerate. They don't lose their nutritional value. What did Joseph store in the fat years for the lean years ahead? Grains. Why? Because they're just as nutritious today, left whole and intact, as they will be next week, next year, next 10 years from now, 3,000 or 4,000 years from now. Tombs have been discovered in Egypt where they found kernels of grain. When they planted them, they grew. Those tombs were believed to be 3,000 years old. What happened to those seeds? They grew. What does that tell you? They're alive. Their nutritional value and all the life of that seed is still there. So let's look real quick at the anatomy, if you will, of a kernel of grain. And basically, I thought that was black. That was funny. But anyway, this is the basic anatomy of most grains and beans, most seeds. Some are a little different, like corn, a little bit different shape. But this is, say, a wheat kernel. This is a seed. A seed has several layers on the outer surface, known as the bran. The bran is loaded with fiber, loaded with vitamins, loaded with minerals. To the seed, it protects the integrity and the life of that seed, okay? Keeps it whole and intact, keeps it together. Down here in the center part of the seed is the germ. Here in the germ, guess why it's called that? Because that's what germinates. That's where the little sprout comes from. Again, the germ is everything that plant is ever going to be or do is in the germ. It's all the DNA, all the everything. But fatty acids are there. Vitamin E is there. Those essential fatty acids that we hear so much about, that we got to eat all the fish and all of that. What did people used to do when they couldn't ship fish in from all over? They ate grains and seeds because those fatty acids are there. And, of course, raw milk and goat milk and cheese and yogurt and all those wonderful things. So loaded with vitamins, loaded with minerals. Also, the bran and the germ has lots of amino acids. See, we lump grains in the category of carbohydrates and think we don't get any protein for those. Yes, we do. In fact, most grains have all but one amino acid that our body absolutely has to have. And guess what? We get that amino acid from beans. So that's why I think so many cultures combine grains and beans and makes a complete protein. But anyway, so this is where the little sprout comes from as the seed germinates. Everything else out here in the seed is little packets of protein and starch. This part of the seed is known as the endosperm, better known to you and I as white flour. loaded with protein and starches that our body needs. You didn't know I was going to tell you white flour is really good for you. But God never, now do you hear me? Y'all listening, hear me. It's good for you, but God never intended us to eat it without the bran and the germ, without the fiber, without the vitamins, without the minerals, because basically it is protein and starch. There are no vitamins and minerals to speak of here in relationship to the kernel of grain. So left whole and intact, storable, right? What happens when I mill this grain into flour? What happens? Just like this morning, put it in my mill, came out flour. What begins to happen? Well, now all the vitamins and all the minerals, all the fats and oils and the vitamin E are exposed to the air, and a process known as oxidation begins to take place immediately. You do not have to be a food scientist or have a scientific laboratory in your kitchen to have seen oxidation. May not be observable in your flour, but you've all seen it. You've all cut an apple. You've all cut, how about an avocado? Something that's really high in fat. It doesn't take long for that thing to start turning dark. That is an oxidation process. What you don't see with your eyes is that vitamins and minerals and some of the nutrients begin to get destroyed in the presence of oxygen. It uses them up. So the flour begins to break down. I have read, and I get a lot of questions about this, but that first publication that I read that you can lose as much as 45% of the vitamins and minerals that are there in the first day alone from oxidation. I've seen some other that say longer, but that's what I read, and by 3 days you can lose as much as 90%. In the early days, I studied a lot of Dr. Wilfred Shute. He was a world-renowned cardiologist. He used vitamin E. He did a lot of research. He used vitamin E to treat heart disease. And I found it interesting. And it's so funny. These doctors and health professionals from years ago, and Adele Davis, I don't know if you've ever heard of her, world-renowned biochemist, they write these books that have nothing to do with milling your own grain and making your own bread. But you know what they say? Heart disease was never a problem until milling your grains, taking the bran and germ away. So I've gotten a little ahead of myself, came on the scene. But here's what he said. He was thrilled because he used vitamin E to treat heart disease. One of the richest food sources is wheat, particularly wheat germ. And you may see it when you buy capsules of vitamin E. It's typically the source is wheat germ oil. And he said he was so glad when vitamin E became isolated and encapsulated, because prior to that, he was using wheat germ oil to treat his patients. And he said after 3 days, there's not enough viable vitamin E to be therapeutically used. So there's kind of my 3-day coming at me again. So anyway, this happens. Now, prior to the 1900s, most of the bread baked in this country was done so at home. People were unaware that they were losing vitamin and mineral, but what they did know is the flour would spoil because those oils will go rancid. So in the late 1800s, it was discovered, got a great idea. If we sift the bran away from that flour and sift the germ away from that flour and leave only the endosperm, the white flour, the protein and starch, this flour won't spoil at all. Proverbs 14 tells us this: there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is death. Because what happened with this discovery, it led to the invention of these massive steel rolling mills, they called them, which could take the grain, crush it, run and mill it into flour, run it through sifters that would take the bran and germ out and produce massive volumes of this long-lasting white flour. What happened? Everybody's like, hallelujah, I don't have to grind my own grain. I don't have to live by a mill and go down to the millers and get my flour. So everyone was happy, and not only that, it made fluffy bread. So eventually, the local millers went out of business, the steel rolling mills became on the scene, and whole grain flour was a thing of the past because everyone loved the new white flour that was on the market. But what happened that was unexpected with this discovery, because you see, white flour was actually always around, but it was reserved for the wealthy and the royalty. It was around in the back of the days of the Egyptians and back of the days of Romans. In fact, the status of your family was often judged by how white your bread was, because rich people had servants and bakers that could sift the bran and germ away and make fluffy bread. Poor people couldn't afford that luxury. Number one, they couldn't lose that much of their food because about 25% of the flour is bran and germ. So if they sift that away, they lose that. And then they just didn't have the time. But here's what happened. Now, for the first time in history, white flour was bread for everybody, rich and poor alike. So everybody had this. Well, guess what happened? 3 diseases became epidemic at the time. One disease, beriberi, is a vitamin B1 deficiency. It's thiamine deficiency. It results in nervous disorders. Pellagra was another epidemic disease that came on the scene around in the early 1900s. So all this is happening in the late 1800s, early 1900s. By 1910, white flour was it, okay? Pellagra is a vitamin B3 deficiency. First case of pellagra actually diagnosed here in Atlanta, Georgia in, I believe, 1905. They had 30,000 cases in 1 year. They had never seen this. Pellagra was skin eruptions, usually a horrible burning sensation on the end of your nose, dysentery, horrible GI disturbances. Listen to this, dementia, mental insanity, and death. It's known as the disease of the 4 Ds: dysentery, dementia, dermatitis, and death. In fact, some studies I read said Georgia and South Carolina particularly plagued by a pellagra, so much so that mental institutions were literally overflowing. They did not have enough beds to house the patients. That's pretty significant. Anemia, a 3rd disease. So eventually, this puzzled health officials all over the country. They're like, what in the world? Why are we seeing this? Thought that it was an infectious disease, and eventually they traced it to the new white flour on the market. They went to the millers and said, please put the Brandon germ back in. The millers went, nope, not going to do that because we're selling the Brandon germ to the cattle feed industry, which is still done today. We're not going to lose that very lucrative market, and they ignored them. Eventually, the health officials in 1948 went to them and said, you got to do something. So that's when it began to be government mandated that the flour would be enriched. Now, as a food scientist, when I read that on a bag of flour, I thought, oh, we're doing y'all a favor. We're making this better than it would have been had we left it alone. No, for the 35 to 40 nutrients that you lose by taking away the bran and the germ, you ready for this? They put 4 back in. 4, 3 B vitamins and iron. It would take 50 years, 1998, this is my lifetime here, 1998, watching the rising incidence of birth defects before they would go, ooh, we better put the folic acid back in there too. Now, mind you, these are not naturally occurring B vitamins that they're enriching, naturally that are there, but they're enriching it with synthetic vitamins and minerals that most of us cannot adequately take care of. Supposedly, they got rid of beriberi and pellagra, but I have to ask you, how many nervous disorders do we have in this country today? How much mental insanity do we have in this country today? How much dermatitis and skin eruptions? I had a young mom in yesterday. She brought her little boy, and she goes, I got a new title for you. I'm going to call you my dermatologist. Started eating the bread 2 months ago. All the child's eczema is gone. Yet doctor after doctor, and all they want to do is put you on steroids. This is a problem, a real problem. And if this were not enough, that they take all the good stuff out, they bleach it with a product called nitrogen trichloride. They expose it to benzoyl peroxide, which is known to cause liver problems. They enhance it with potassium bromate, known to cause thyroid and liver issues. What are we doing? How did we get here? You know, I find bread scriptures everywhere now that I study bread. Isaiah 55 is one of my favorite. It says, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your earnings for what does not satisfy? When I first read that scripture, I was like, Lord, I had no idea. And I was a food scientist. I had no idea that what I was buying my family and serving my family was not bread. So that's what I kind of want to leave you with today. Like I said, I find bread scriptures everywhere. Exodus 23:25, one of my favorite. God leads the children of Israel out of Egypt. And he says, here's the thing. If you will obey me, I will bless your bread, I will bless your water, and I will take sickness from the midst of you. And perhaps one of my very most favorite, and I'm going to close it with this, is Deuteronomy 24, verse 6. I read through my Bible every year, try to. Genesis is easy, right? Exodus, yeah, pretty easy till I just finished the tabernacle this morning. I'm like, okay, lampstands, golden and blue curtains and rods and hooks and all of that. And it can kind of get bogged down. And then Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and then Numbers. Oh, that's a lot of numbers. Then Deuteronomy, we're back at it again, you know. So I'm trudging through Deuteronomy, but I come to this verse, and I remember where I was when I saw it. Brad probably does too. I got so excited because in Deuteronomy and in the law, God's law, I hate to even call it the law, it calls it instruction. That instruction is there to tell us how to love God, to love ourselves, and to love each other. That's all it is. And so it's his ways of doing. And in Deuteronomy 24, verse 6, there's a verse in there that tells you how to treat your neighbor. In that time period, if you were going to borrow something from me, or I was going to borrow something from you, let's say I'm going to borrow something from you, I would give you something as a pledge, something of value that belonged to me to say, I'm gonna bring this back. I'm gonna return what I've borrowed from you. This is my pledge. So I would give you something of value to say, this is my pledge to you that I'm gonna return and I'm gonna pay you back. God had a law, an instruction of what you could not take as a pledge. Deuteronomy 24, verse 6 says, do not take a man's upper millstone as a pledge, because you would be taking his life. Wow. In 1900, we let somebody take our mills and bread making out of our home, and we have been getting sick and sick ever since. They've been taking our life. Jesus said, I am the real bread of life. He who comes to me shall be satisfied. And you know what else he said? I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Do you feel like you have an abundant life? And I want to tell you something else, and I'll close with this. Being healthy is not just about not being sick. It is about being able to do what God has called you to do. Go to a third world country. Go to your neighbor next door and not go, I'm sick, I'm on this medication, I can't leave my home, blah, 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 whatever it is. I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. So as you shop the perimeter of the grocery store, which you can, so you can get real whole foods in the grocery store, there's one you can't get there, and that's bread. Because I hate to tell you, even the stuff labeled whole grain is not the same. I have a loaf of whole grain bread, 100% whole grain bread that I've had on my shelf for 2 or 3 years now. Oh no, maybe more than that. It's not molded yet. The last loaf that I had, 100% whole grain bread, it disintegrated. It never molded, it never rotted, it just started turning to dust. Okay? Yeah. So anyway, God bless you all. Remember, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your earnings for what does not satisfy? You didn't know till today. Whoops, now you know. So anyway, I think we need to close. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I did bring some articles. I call this my Healthy Eating Simplified. So if you want an article, of course, first thing, I think, buy a grain mill. Mill your own grain, make your own bread. And it's not hard. Listen, I made that bread this morning, okay? So, and still read Exodus, the rest of it. But anyway, we have a ministry called Real Bread Outreach, where God literally has taken us around the world to teach people how to make bread. If you still have a CD player, help yourself. The CDs are free. I have more than just I put out here. This is kind of what I talked today on, plus the poopy talk. You want to hear the poopy talk. But and then the red CD is my whole rebuttal of the anti-grain, anti-gluten propaganda. It is propaganda. What Jesus compared himself to. If we all think bread's bad and we hate bread, what's going to happen when Jesus comes back? But anyway, so and this is cards to come to our store. Come. You'll walk in, you'll go, I didn't know this was here. This is the best kept secret in Woodstock. Then if you want to hear more of me, I have a podcast called Sue's Healthy Minutes. I think I'm on episode 157. If you go back to the beginning, you'll hear a lot of what I had today. And then check out the It's the Bread stories. You can tell Siri to play me and Alexa, and I'll just pop on. Whoop, and there I am. So thank you so much for having me today. I have